Welcome back, everyone. Listen, if you're a focused learner looking to cut through all the noise and get straight to the facts, well, you're definitely in the right place today. In this explainer, we're going to unpack a massive, timely topic for Vietnamese timber and rubber businesses. We're talking about exactly how you can lock in and secure your international market access. It really comes down to the critical certifications that prove exactly where your materials come from. So grab your notebook, pay close attention, and let's get started.
Okay, let's dive into this. In 2025, Vietnam's wood and wood product exports crossed a monumental threshold. We're talking $17 billion. That is a historic achievement for the domestic forestry and manufacturing sector. I mean, it flat out proves that Vietnamese products are in incredibly high demand globally. But, here's the reality check. Holding on to those billions in the coming years? It's not just about making great products anymore. It's all about the paperwork, the traceability, and literally proving your roots.
And that brings us to a massive tension point, 2026. If you're an exporter, you need to circle December 30th, 2026 in red ink on your calendar right now. Seriously, if you want to keep your piece of that $17 billion pie, you absolutely must be ready for the rapidly approaching European Union Deforestation Regulation deadlines. Time is ticking, and the market is about to radically shift on us.
So, here's our roadmap for today. We'll look at the $17 billion challenge, demystify the VFCS and PEFC acronyms, separate FM from Coke certifications, look at why you'd choose these for a competitive advantage, and then hand you a clear certification roadmap. Let's turn all this alphabet soup into a solid business strategy.
Starting right off with Section 1, the $17 billion challenge and the stakes of global trade. The landscape out there is shifting dramatically. Major markets like the EU, the US, Japan, and Korea are drastically tightening their sourcing rules. They're simply no longer taking anyone's word for it. They want hard, undeniable proof of sustainability.
And the biggest hurdle of them all? It's the EUDR, the EU Deforestation Regulation. This is a strict mandate requiring absolute proof that your exported wood, rubber, and related commodities are legally sourced and entirely deforestation-free. You guys, this is not just a polite suggestion from the European Union. It's a massive legal roadblock. If you fail to prove where your raw materials come from, you will completely lose your access to the European market, period.
The urgency here really cannot be overstated. The EUDR was amended in December 2025, which set a firm deadline for large and medium enterprises on December 30, 2026. Micro and small enterprises do have a slight buffer until June 30, 2027. Now, I want to be super clear here. Having a forest certification does not magically replace the specific geolocation data that the EUDR requires. But, and this is a big but, it provides the crucial audit-ready foundation you absolutely need to get your supply chain prepared for these strict deadlines.
Moving right along to Section 2, demystifying VFCS and PEFC. Breaking down the acronyms. How do we actually solve this? Well, these are the exact tools that can effectively save your supply chain and keep your products moving across borders.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is Vietnam's current forestry landscape. Out of over 2.65 million hectares of total forest area, a massive 1.68 million hectares are entirely uncertified. Currently, only about 131,000 hectares are PEFC certified. On top of that, right now, there are only 194 PEFC chain of custody certificates active across the entire country. So what does this actually show us? It shows a massive, untapped opportunity for national growth and a huge chance for early adopters to really stand out to global buyers.
So what exactly is VFCS? It stands for the Vietnam Forest Certification Scheme. This is a completely homegrown solution, built specifically for Vietnamese forestry conditions. It was established under a Prime Minister's decision and is managed by the Vietnam Forest Certification Center, or VFCC, under the Vietnamese Academy of Forest Sciences. Basically, it's tailored perfectly for Vietnam's unique landscape of smallholders and domestic supply chains.
But, domestic isn't enough for global trade. That's where PEFC comes in. PEFC is the program for the endorsement of forest certification. It is literally the world's largest forest certification umbrella. Back in October 2020, PEFC officially endorsed the VFCS. This is huge. It means Vietnam's national scheme meets the absolute highest international benchmarks. When you get certified, you get a dual VFCS and PEFC logo, a symbol that global buyers instantly recognize and implicitly trust.
And here is a surprising fact that I just love highlighting. Vietnam is the very first PEFC member in the entire world to supply certified natural rubber and rubber wood. No way, right? It's true.
This is an incredibly powerful and highly competitive advantage. It positions Vietnam's massive rubber sector perfectly to meet the soaring global demands for sustainable materials.
All right, Section 3, FM versus COC certification, knowing what you need. Let's bring this down to practical application. We need to figure out exactly which of these applies to your specific role in the supply chain, because honestly, you don't necessarily need both.
So the crucial point is cleanly separating the two. First is FM, or forest management. This is strictly for the growers, the forest owners, the plantations, and the rubber estates. Then we have COC, or chain of custody. This is for the processors, the traders, the buyers, and the manufacturers. Basically, if you're a factory making furniture, you need COC. You definitely do not need to own a forest to get a COC certificate. You just need to prove that the raw materials you buy come from a certified source and are tracked properly right through your facility.
This naturally leads us to Section 4, why choose VFCS/PEFC, the competitive advantage. Businesses today have a really strategic choice to make when selecting their certification standard, and it's super important to understand the landscape here. You'll typically see two major names out there, VFCS/PEFC and FSC. Now, neutrally speaking, both of these are excellent, highly credible, and widely accepted internationally. FSC operates as a single global standard setter. However, because VFCS/PEFC is tailored specifically to local Vietnamese conditions, especially for group forests and those smaller holders, it is very often the more accessible and budget-friendly starting point for Vietnamese SMEs who are looking to achieve international compliance without breaking the bank.
Let's just break down the core benefits real quick. Choosing VFCS/PEFC directly unlocks market access in those strict regions we talked about like the EU, US, and Japan. It builds your EUDR readiness by forcing you to implement a due diligence system, or DDS. It's highly cost-efficient for local businesses, and it aligns perfectly with Vietnam's own national strategies for reaching net zero by 2050. This isn't just a piece of paper you frame on a wall, folks. It is a literal strategic shield against losing your international buyers.
Let's move to Section 5, your certification roadmap, and see how this builds into an actionable plan. This is your step-by-step manual for actually getting that COC certification into your hands.
Here are the 6 steps you need to follow. It all starts with a scope and gap analysis to see exactly where you currently stand. Then, you design your due diligence system to track materials. From there, it's all about training your staff and implementing the rules. You'll definitely want to run a mock audit to catch mistakes early, well before the official audit by an accredited body. Finally, you receive your certificate, which is valid for 5 years. And listen, with expert consultants like ISC Global or Duke Luong Services helping you build this out, an SME can genuinely achieve this in just a few months.
Now, a quick word of warning. The biggest delays in this process almost always come from weak documentation. You absolutely must have these essential files ready. Your COCOC manual, your DDS for controlling suppliers, your volume accounting methods, clear rules for separating materials out on the factory floor, rules for recording PFC claims on your invoices, and procedures for how you actually use the logo. Having these dialed in is 100% mandatory.
And honestly, this illustrates why paperwork alone just isn't enough. Remember this, a certificate is only maintained when the team understands and operates it correctly. Think about it. You could pass your first audit, but your certification will absolutely shatter at your very first annual surveillance audit if your internal staff, from the purchasing manager right down to the forklift driver in the warehouse, doesn't actually understand the rules they're supposed to be following.
That is exactly why a 4-layer training approach is required. You need awareness training for all staff so everyone gets the big picture. Then, deep specialist training for the core team managing the system. Next, you need internal auditor training so your own people can spot-check compliance. Finally, a system mock audit to test the whole shebang. This layered approach is how you transform dry, standard rules into daily, bulletproof operational habits.
Which brings us to our final thought for today's explainer. The clock is ticking. December 2026 and the EUDR are fast approaching. The regulations are written, the deadlines are set, and the market is demanding transparency like never before. So I have to ask you, is your supply chain ready to prove its roots? Don't wait until the gates close. Take action, get your documentation in order, and secure your market access today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep learning.